Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. It's Aaron from ClassHorrorCast, and I'm back again with another episode. So in this episode again, I'm going to try another new kind of unique idea. This week we are going to look at one in particular I'm going to focus on, and it's an unmade sequel or a pitched sequel for a movie, a crossover movie actually, in the veins of the like of, you know, something like Freddy Vs Jason or some of the other movies that you might have heard of in the past. So this movie we're going to take a look at is a proposed movie of Michael Myers versus Pinhead. Now, I don't think that was the original title or anything like that. Obviously they're just the two characters that would have crossed over. There is somewhat of a title, I think, somewhere here, so I'm just going to start reading through this and give you guys a little more context, and I'll jump in and out at different parts maybe and give my thoughts, we'll see. So I hope you enjoy. So, up until the new millennium, cinematic crossovers were largely things like Godzilla, etc. But all that changed in 2003 with the arrival of Freddy Vs Jason. The Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th mashup had been 16 years in the making. New Line Cinema shelled out a reported $6 million on script development alone, and as many as 16 different writers taking a stab at the concept. You can actually read about all this, and it's a very, very, very good book. It's called Slash of the Titans, and it basically brings you through the entire process of that movie being made. And it talks about all the different ideas and scripts, and there's a lot of interviews in there with the people who wrote them, so that's really interesting. You should check that out. So despite such strange beginnings, however, Freddy vs Jason ended up being a huge hit, raking in $116.6 million off the back of a $30 million budget. All of a sudden, crossover movies were extremely popular. The kind of pop culture hybrid once reserved for the world of comic books was becoming big business in Hollywood. Freddy vs Jason was soon followed by Paul W.S. Anderson's Alien vs Predator, which also cleaned up at the box office, making $177.4 million off the back of a $60 million budget. So again, like, that's another kind of surprising, actually. I mean, I don't mind those movies. They're by no means like fantastic or Oscar-worthy movies or anything like that, but it just kind of goes to show you like the power of money with this stuff. These things that we all hope and pray for that just have no way of being made, and then all of a sudden, you know, one makes it big, and then these things, they can't make enough of them. Okay, so it was around this time that the idea for a crossover involving Halloween's mass killer Michael Myers and Hellraiser's iconic sadomasochistic Cenobite Pinhead was first floated around. Filmmaker Dave Parker, who went on to enjoy success with horror films like The Dead Hate the Living and The Hills Run Red, revealed in an interview with Creature Corner he pitched an idea for Michael Myers vs Pinhead to Dimension. So this is some little excerpts from this interview. I had pitched unsuccessfully Freddy vs Jason to a guy named Ross Hammer at Sean Cunningham's company around 94 or early 95. After that didn't go well, I started to think about what other franchises were at other studios. It was a no-brainer, seeing as Dimension had both Halloween and Hellraiser franchises. So I put together a trailer using footage from the Halloween movies, and I called the idea Halloween. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I absolutely love that idea. Again, I still don't really know where this is going, but I do love the name play there. Halloween, I really think that would have sold alone just off of that. If somebody hasn't already copyrighted that or trademarked that name, I'd be very surprised. So, Parker elaborated further on his idea for the plot of the movie in an interview with Fangoria Corner, published later that same year, saying that explaining why Michael Myers couldn't die led to opening the doors to introduce Pinhead and the Hellraiser mythos. I was trying to come up with a plausible way to get these two guys together to fight, he said. So why does he all of a sudden go out and kill his sister in Halloween? He's trick-or-treating in a flashback and he goes up to this one house. And he sees a guy with the black boots who gives him the box. He opens it and the Lord of the Dead, Sam Hain, escapes from hell and takes over Michael's body because he doesn't want to be in hell. Now Sam Hain, who is the Shape, and that's why he can't be killed. With the origin story out of the way, the modern part of the tale naturally followed. So the story takes place when people try to destroy the Myers house, and they find the box hidden between the walls. Of course they open it and Pinhead shows up. And it's Halloween, and it's the Myers house. So Michael shows up because there are people there, and Pinhead recognises that Michael is Sam Hain because he can feel it. Which begins this whole battle in the real world. And of course, the third act is going to take them to hell. So I actually don't hate that idea. It sounds kind of like it could have worked in a way. Again, it might not have been perfect, but and I'm probably biased considering I love Freddy Vs Jason. But I kind of excited, and I wish I could read like a fully fleshed out script for this. So let's see what comes up next. Despite Parker's intriguing proposal, Dimension rejected the concept. This was the mid-90s after all. A time when Kramer vs. Kramer was about as close as you got to a versus film. It would take another 8 years and the success of Freddy vs. Jason before the studio would be turned on at the idea of a horror movie matchup. At one point there were even plans afoot for Pinhead to feature in Freddy vs. Jason. One draft of the script written by Mark Swift and Damien Shannon saw Kruger and Voorhees fight their way down to hell, only for a familiar Cenobite to appear and say, "Gentlemen, what seems to be the problem?" This cameo could have paved the way for an even more outlandish sequel featuring all three horror icons. Unfortunately, New Line scoffed at the idea of licensing Pinhead from Dimension. Not that anyone was particularly disappointed at Dimension. Speaking to Your Move magazine, Pinhead actor Doug Bradley said they didn't think it would work. They predicted that Freddy vs. Jason would bomb, but it opened at the top of the box office and stayed there for a second weekend. And I mean, money-wise as well, this movie really did do what it intended on doing, and I still think it stands up there for slasher fans as one of the better movies. Like, I mean, to think that we got a movie called Freddy vs. Jason, I'm not sure if we're ever going to see something like that again, to be totally honest with you. It just seems so iconic to a horror fan to have both those guys cross over in the same movie, and especially the fact that it had been, pushing on 20 years of trying to get this thing done and 16, 17 scripts to finally get it. I think it was a huge thing. Of course, that success made Dimension feel more confident about a Hellraiser and Halloween crossover. Eager to up the ante, in late 2003 the studio set a release date of Halloween 2004 for the film. They also enlisted the biggest of the big guns to get the project rolling. In a surprise move, Dimension Films reached out to the original Hellraiser writer and director Clive Barker, as well as Halloween's own original co-writer and director John Carpenter. The plan was for Barker to write and Carpenter to direct, something Barker later confirmed in an interview for Halloween 25 Years of Terror documentary. Whether Barker got around to writing the script is unclear, but he definitely had ideas, very interesting ideas, as Bradley revealed during an interview marking the 30th anniversary of the original Hellraiser. So this is a quote from Doug Bradley, I think. "I remember getting quite excited at the prospect of it," Bradley says. Clive said that the versus bit, the Michael Myers versus Pinhead bit, was a bit beside the point. It was a bit boring given that Michael doesn't speak, which makes him a disappointment to Pinhead. Clive wasn't interested in a mano-a-mano confrontation. He was interested in finding the places where the Hellraiser and Halloween landscapes might have crossed over. The first Halloween works like a classic vampire movie, with Michael as Dracula and Dr. Loomis as Van Helsing. That relationship helped set up the conflict in the film. Dr. Loomis spends a lot of time in the film warning people that they don't know what they're dealing with, Bradley says. It gave Michael this supernatural, mysterious element that made him so powerful. There was a suggestion that he was something not human, and Clive felt that there was a way in there. Clive saw him as a sadomasochistic sexual pervert and a serial killer, which would be enough to pique Pinhead's interest. At the time, John Carpenter was in something of a self-imposed retirement, following the poor reviews that had greeted his most recent film, which was Ghosts of Mars. Michael Myers in Pinhead was not only a shot at redemption, it offered a chance to collaborate with one of the most unique voices in the world of horror. But just when it looked like the most unlikely of crossovers would come to fruition, everything stopped. While Dimension believed in the crossover's potential, longtime Halloween producer Mustafa Akkad was opposed to the idea. And it was Akkad, crucially, who owned the rights to the Halloween franchise, having purchased Carpenter and co-writer Deborah Hill's controlling interest during pre-production on Halloween 4. Barker would later hint at studio interference, telling a Fangoria convention that the Shape, aka Myers, was treated like Hamlet by a certain bigwig upstairs. In any case, the prospects of convincing Akkad of the project's viability had not been helped by an online fan poll created by the official Halloween movies website at the time, which asked fans if they wanted to see a Halloween and Hellraiser crossover. And I don't think that got huge push there, but that's kind of all the information I could find on this. Very interesting idea. While I know it sounds completely bizarre to think of a world where we might have Pinhead and Michael Myers in the same movie, and even having tie-ins, I do like the fact that Clive tried to maybe look at something a little bit different, rather than having, Pinhead and Michael just randomly kind of show up with some cheap, schlocky story just to fight. I like the idea that he kind of didn't want to go so much into the verses and more about like how their landscapes would have crossed over, and maybe certain confrontations, but not, it didn't have to be this big clash kind of pointless thing. I definitely do think that he probably had some stuff, it sounds like, already in mind, and I just feel like that Clive wasn't really that person who, would want to just smash two characters together for no real reason. And the fact that there was potential to call the movie Halloween leads me to believe that, he I know that wasn't his idea, but he may have wanted to stray away from the idea of, calling this maybe Pinhead versus Myers or Hellraiser versus Halloween, or whatever way you want to say it. But yeah, it's kind of a pity that, Akkad didn't want to do that, and I do know that he was very protective, and I guess they still were in a way protective of the franchise, and they want to be involved and they don't want to just feel like they're selling out. But I mean, at the same time, we did get some god-awful movies there. I personally am a fan of things like Halloween Resurrection. I can appreciate that it took a completely unique idea and tried to do something different. While it may not have worked and it was like super cheesy, etc., I can appreciate the fact that they did try something different. They attempted to do a different look. Whether or not that worked is kind of irrelevant for me. But yeah, it's kind of a pity that, they didn't breathe life. And part of me, without knowing any of this, part of me does feel like maybe they felt like, why would Michael Myers and the Halloween franchise want to be involved with, Hellraiser and Pinhead and Cenobites? Maybe feeling like that was a little bit of an inferior franchise, which may be correct in some senses, box office wise and stuff, but I don't know, I think Pinhead and the Hellraiser series, and especially anything that Clive Barker does, is quite a formidable opponent, and it would have been fantastic to see the two of them together. I mean, Pinhead and the Hellraiser franchises had some really cool, maybe bizarre at times, but really cool crossovers in comics and books, and you know, any fans of Clive Barker will know, like, that he goes so deep, you know, into backgrounds and lore and mythologies. And, like, I would have loved to have seen what he would have pulled out for this. And then, on top of that, to have John Carpenter direct the whole thing, it would have been, I don't know, I don't see how it could have failed, if that makes sense. It would have sold a shit ton just on the name alone. But I'm not saying it would have been a masterpiece, but I don't think it would have been as bad as everybody might think. And especially, like, you know, if you're like me and you can enjoy things like Freddy Vs Jason, I honestly think it might have had an even more coherent story, to be honest with you. Having somebody like Clive Barker involved, I don't think we would have gotten, you know, your generic slasher movie thing, which would have been a really interesting idea. But let me know what you guys think. If there's any other movies out there that you think would have been fun crossovers, whether they were ever talked about or not is irrelevant. Shoot me a message on Instagram, or, you know, leave me a comment under this post on Instagram. And like always, I appreciate everybody listening. This is just some extra content that I've decided to just stick together. It's going to be super raw, like I said. It's not going to go through the usual editing process. I'm not going to edit out, you know, slips in reading or if I mess up or whatever. Just little mini episodes, I guess, to pepper in here and there. Something different, unique to try out. And it gives me a chance to talk about things that I probably wouldn't get a chance to talk about otherwise. I appreciate all the support from everybody. I've got my website up and running now, so you can find everything that I do, from my blog to podcast episodes, at www.ClassHorrorCast.com. Also, I'm super active on Instagram, so if anybody does want to chat or anything like that, hit me up on Instagram. I have some cool stuff coming up soon, I hope, on YouTube as well. And yeah, just like, share, follow, anything you can. Leave me a review wherever you listen to podcasts. That really helps out. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one, guys.